Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my latest review of Bates Motel. My name is Emily Smith and I am going to walk you through the madness. Or well, as far as madness goes, this week's episode was a little bit more subdued, but spoiler alert before I spill any further beans, as I will be bearing all in this review. So without further ado, let's kick it, let's get to it, and okay, a little bit further ado, I would advise those of you who are into the show to consider following me on Twitter because I do live tweet the episodes every Monday night. So if there's any thoughts that I forget to mention in the video, it's possible that I might have contained that in my live tweeting bonanza. So it's something I do. Something just to put out there. Anyways, let us get into tonight's business. And I have to say, you know, and I'm sure that some of you may be feeling me on this issue, but this week's episode was a bit more in the filler territory as compared to the prior week. But I mean, seriously, if the show is gonna have any longevity, I think that we needed to come down from that to somewhere. And so we were kind of, you know, sort of going through the more disjointed subplots. Everybody's kind of got their own business going on, but I think that in either the next episode or at least by the one following, we're going to see things converging again and certain issues taking on momentum as we make our way to the finale. So I'll go ahead and walk you through each of the individual plots as I can recall them. Met a lot of new little faces in the game here, and it's all kind of connected to the weed empire, which is basically running White Pine Bay. And I guess this episode was kind of a slight bummer for me in that that plotline isn't particularly of interest to me. I guess, you know, I'm all up in the Bates shenanigans. That's pretty much what I am on board for. However, the show is worth it to me such that I will put up with some of the more underwhelming aspects of the story in favor of waiting for further insanities, which I know there will be. And it's a very smartly written show, so I think it's important to consider kind of the moving pieces that we witnessed this week, even if we weren't necessarily getting, you know, the rise of Mother with a Norman or all the fun stuff like that, you know. Things that are more noteworthy. So, first and foremost, I think part of what was a little bit disappointing this week is that we didn't really get to see the dynamic between the trifecta of Norman and Norma and Dylan. Mind you, we just had an enormous falling out on Dylan's part as he's realized exactly who he is in relation to his family, and he doesn't really feel like he's a part of them, and he can't really comprehend trying to find a sense of normalcy in their company. So he's kind of retreating into the business, which again kind of dominated this week's episode, and you have the Zane douche who's basically screwing up everything. And I mean, he's just such a stereotypically, like, I don't even know, I can't take him seriously. I can't even. It stops at the bleach blonde hair. I can't deal with it. Do not pass go, do not collect $200 or however much you are making in the zone, because who and why and where did you come from? And I mean, I feel like this guy was put into a 90s time capsule and he just busts out like, hey guys, let's, okay, I was about to go kind of like surfer dude status. I don't really know like the weed growing community. I'm not up in that particular angle of things. I may live in the Pacific Northwest, but that ain't the crew that I jive with, so I'm not even gonna pretend to know, innocent that I am. But anyways, so that was kind of what Romero's plotline this episode hinged on as well, was Zane having fun, torching down his palace. And I mean, I like Romero as a character, and I think it was really funny how Norma was kind of poking at him for his stoicness and his rigidity in the face of all things concerning life. You know, that was one of my favorite scenes of the episode. I think they always have these fun little like verbal joustings, and I think that they get along really well. And, you know, they had this sort of like, oh, our faces are so close, I am sitting here, you know, cleaning your wounds, and like, ah, the tension. But it's not just like this sexual tension. He's kind of found this sort of intellectual match in Norma, because she both wants to know what's going on and is sort of holding back. So they have this kind of like, I don't know if I'd call it like cat and mouse, but they definitely have this sort of like sword match thing. Again, the verbal jousting. That's kind of the best way that I can describe their relationship, and it keeps things interesting enough in my book. So Romero deals Zane a little bit of retribution, all the while being supremely chill. That's something else that cracks me up as well, is he's constantly at this level of like just near flatline. And so he's like, you know, dealing the punches, and he's flailing around, and he's still just like this. And his makeup is still perfect. You know, his biological mascara that he's got going on. And I will forever see him as the mayor of Gotham City. So that's, to me, where he got his infinite calm. Because you're going to be putting up with a lot of mayhem in that fair city, which, you know. Anyway, so that was kind of the whole Zane thing. And then, I mean, I was really surprised that Dylan actually put himself on the line for this guy. He ain't got no respect. He's pushing the gambit, and I mean, I don't know. Again, I can't really buy him, so I just wish he would sort of like disappear into the oblivion so we can move on. But he's there, and people are throwing down for him, whether they're beating against him or letting themselves get hit by cars for him. Not to say that Dylan was intentionally putting himself out there. I mean, he's on the job, he's in defense mode. I mean, whether the guy has ridiculous hair or not, technically they're kind of partners. They're in this together, so he does what he needs to do. And then that puts him in the crosshairs of the insanities happening. He winds up in the ER or wherever he ends up coming back around to. And he meets his lady boss, so I mean, we'll see if there's gonna be this kind of romantic thing, or again, if it will kind of be more like the Romero-Norma situation, where they're kind of like the, you know, intellectual equals of sorts, but playing in the game together, trying not to step on one another's toes in the great dance of this fair city. So that's kind of how I see all of that shenanigans, you know, in the broader scheme of things. And I think that when Dylan was in the restaurant, wasn't he actually trying to call Norman before Zane showed up, before that whole incident? So, I mean, he's kind of in this place where he's trying to put everything behind him, just as Norma tells Norman at the beginning of the episode, we need to move on, it's you and me, core unit, we're the best. So I think that Dylan is using his work to distract him, and now it's going to kind of take over for a time until, well, we'll see what ends up propelling him back into the arms of his wonderfully complex family. But so that's that. So we'll take a quick look at what's going on with Emma and Cupcake Boy. So I don't know. I was a little bit charmed by him in the last episode, but I don't really know what to think. I mean, as far as Emma and Norman's current love matches go, I'm not like feeling the fire per se, partly because I guess it's kind of weird for me, like watching like teenagers doing it. Not exactly my cup of tea. And so whenever we have those episodes in the show, I'm just kind of like, okay, just let it go, alright, let's move on to the next thing, please. I'm not exactly visually, emotionally invested in this, and we know that things are inevitably bound to fall apart. A lot of us have been through high school and that scene, and this is also White Pine Bay, and you know, so I mean, if we're to say that the city has an influence, in some way, then I would say that it's probably already cursed everything and everyone who's around. I mean, it's sort of the same situation as like Gotham City. Like, why does anyone still live there with all the weird crap and the corruption that is extremely evident? But I mean, I guess you get used to it or something. But I mean, yeah, that is a place that I'm not going to go. Neither of those places, in fact. So you'll never see me departing for those places. But anyways, so again, don't really know what to say there. I mean, I guess the most notable scene for Emma in my book was the whole sex talk with Norma, which I was really freaked out at the beginning of that scene in particular. I mean, I've always been touched by those Norma-Emma moments because Emma is the daughter that Norma never had, and she truly has a soft spot for her, especially when she was kind of hoping that her and Norman might kind of be a thing, because for Norma, I think that she perceives their togetherness as something that she can control and influence and kind of bend to her own will, I guess. Or it's just, I think it's a situation in which she feels like she can exert control. She feels comfortable with it. She has a certain elusive conception of who might work out for Norman, other than herself. But anyways, that is an incestuous story for another day. So I was really scared because after the events of the last couple episodes where Norma is explaining the whole thing with her brother and just all of that, sex seems like it would be a touchier topic than most. But what Norma is astonishingly and honestly tragically good at is putting up a front in the most painful or intimidating of circumstances. So all of a sudden, and she just puts on this airy little veneer, and she's like, well, if you really like each other and it's just great and you're attracted, then it should be lovely. And she just completely steps back and removes herself. I mean, it reminds me of that therapy session that she had back in the first season when she was talking about how, like, her mother smelled of cupcakes, or there's a very pervading theme of cupcakes and weed in this show. It all just comes together. But anyways, when she was inventing this whole backstory for her psychiatrist, and she kind of does the same thing with Emma, but for different reasons. I think trying to protect both herself and Emma, and maybe even projecting a bit of herself onto Emma in that moment where this would be her first time, and Norma kind of wants to imagine what it would have been like if her first time experiencing intercourse was something that she wanted. And that just, like, devastates my heart to even say, you know. I mean, I think that no matter what experiences of abuse, everyone should have that first time where it is something mutual, regardless. I mean, I'm not gonna go down that path for now. I don't want to, you know, any triggers for anybody who might be watching this, but yes, I mean, it was this really tense turned comical turned tragic scene. I mean, very, very multivalent stuff going on, and Norma just kind of lets herself gush over, and she's also sort of boistered by the sense of confidence over her getting ready to knock out the bypass in a way that she thinks is going to be very above board. And again, the enduring optimism that she exudes definitely carried her a step or two in this episode, and as she went to meet up with Nick Ford on the yacht. I've seen way too many crime shows to know that the guys that, you know, the boat and the this and the I don't know. And I just saw The Wolf of Wall Street recently too, so I just, you know, yachts and men of power and shenanigans, they're all just kind of intertwined and intermingling in my brain. That, and we know how the town works, even though we don't, like, fully. We just get the sense that everything is woven into this corrupt power structure where there's this like facade of an actual government and the way that things should work, and then the way that the city actually functions is all off the paper. And I have to say that I like cackled when the guy that Nick Ford sent Norma to, his name was Brian Fuller, of all things, all you Hannibal people. I mean, he's kind of our Lord and Savior in that department, but so I thought that was funny. Brian Fuller making an environmental impact report, of all things, and well, we know that that wasn't exactly an environmental impact report as it pertains to biological organisms that aren't people. As in, yeah, I'm pretty sure that that was about taking out the Lee Burnham, Durham, Sternum, name wasn't memorable enough to stick in my brain, but I think, you know, Norma was kind of the catalyst, the vessel of this whole procedure of taking this guy out, unseating him from power. He was the big pusher of the bypass, and now it's kind of like, okay, so maybe that is not potentially an issue. I mean, the motel arguably still needs to get business, I think, for the story to progress in certain ways. So I sense that we're going to be moving away from the bypass and into the whole, uh-oh, what did Norma Bates step in scenario, which is something that is suggested by Romero, and automatically Norma's like, oh Lord, no, we didn't, no meeting, no, But suddenly she has become a pawn on the chessboard, and I don't know, man. I don't know. As if she even needs that struggle, being that she's got a budding little monster under her roof. So it's the internal and external wars, the things that are right in front of you, the things that are coming at you head on and from behind. That's pretty much what Norma is facing. So now, I think that I kind of touched on everything a little bit, besides what's going on with Norman and Norma and Cody as well. As far as my feelings about Cody, I don't dislike her, per se. I think, I just, like, Norman and romance and everything in my mind just feels completely doomed. So you're just kind of sitting there, you know, waiting for the anvil to drop or the piano to fall from the skyscraper, you know, like, it's gonna happen. The guillotine is coming down. It's just a matter of, you know, when, really. So of course they have their whole teenage dream fantasy Katy Perry thing going on in the woods, in the treehouse. I made a terrible treehouse sex pun in my live tweeting earlier. I'm not even gonna repeat it here. I can't. I reached for a low branch and I just did there as well. I really hate myself anyway. But yeah, so we all get the sense that this is probably going in the not awesome direction. The not awesome direction, a not awesome direction, articles, I can't talk right now. But I think it was really interesting how Norma kind of approached the situation at the end of the day, not even having known about the blackout that Norman had, and we also discover that Norman is conscious of when he leaves and someone else enters. He doesn't know that somebody else comes in. It's more him just being frustrated. Anyways, going back to Norman and Norma at day's end, after the hot treehouse sex and the Norman helping to indirectly kill a guy, and just all in a day's work, you know, taking care of stuff, running errands, doing life. And so Norma she puts on a very commendable effort to be reasonable with Norman, at least I think, as compared to some other moments that she has had on the series of asserting her will over Norman's. I think that her concerns are valid in the way that Cody went about making introductions in the parking lot. I mean, she's got some valid concerns, aside from, you know, it's not really the loud music and the smoking and tattoos, it's really the sort of indecency with adults, I guess, but we see that she comes from a household of abuse as well, so that's something that factors in, and so all the, you know, there's not really the black and white, he's sort of in the gray of like for some reason Norman feels that he can be safe with her, and I wonder if it's because Cody is so different from Norma, and you know, Norma kind of embodies the latent craziness of Norman, even though he doesn't really realize that whatsoever right now, to our knowledge. In that scene where he lost it on Caleb, that was the voice of Mother, something that he draws from being close to her, and that sense of jealousness and rage, and however you might argue they fuse in Norman to create the Mother persona who kills through him. I feel that he kind of escapes from that when he's with someone like Cody, you know. So that's kind of my long-winded analysis of that situation and why he gravitates toward these types of girls. I mean, Bradley was kind of different, and he's been with a lot of different people, but I tried to sort of look at, you know, does Norman have a type, or how do these different relationships impact him and push him closer to the cliff within. So I mean, yeah, feel free to leave your thoughts and sort of the way you're breaking things down, and predictions as well, because I mean, anything can really happen at this point. But remember that things will, by the end, go horribly and terribly wrong. So there's that for you. Yeah, so pretty decent episode. I'm looking forward to more direct familial interactions. The Norman, Dylan stuff is kind of my favorite. I mean, especially Norma. We'll see where things go, but it looks like the closer that Norman gets with Cody, the more agitated he's going to become with his mother. And I mean, she hasn't been setting off like the crazy sort of jealous vibes. Again, I think that she's been sort of distracted by trying to just move on. And that's what's kind of terrifying about the character of Norma, is that she just does these 180 switches out of nowhere that makes her kind of appear bipolar. But I think that she's so used to all her life just moving effortlessly from a state of extreme peril and panic and vulnerability to absolute strength and sureness, and she has this profound grace that on the surface is very beautiful and beguiling, but we know that that comes from a place of ridiculous hurt. So I mean, just watching her character it's a really fascinating ride. Also, fun observation from earlier in the episode, I love the scenes whenever like Norman and Emma are in the motel lobby together, like listening to music. Norman was listening to that Dancing in the Moonlight song, and if I'm not mistaken, he was looking at pictures of like taxidermy stuff or like bodies? I don't know. Maybe that was just kind of me like glancing wrong and just sort of my brain constructed what I assumed he would be looking at. To such a delightful little tune, but I thought that was pretty hilarious. I like the music choices in this season so far, and of course they've got the ominous music for Nick Ford and the, you know, all those cues. I mean, it makes it easier to digest everything that's going on in the episode. So yeah, so we'll see where things go. Again, this was a slight break from the intensity of last week, and I mean, that's okay, because I know that we're going to be racing at breakneck speed in the upcoming weeks towards something that's inevitably going to be crazy, and apparently the blackouts continue, but as to what's going to set that off, we'll see. You know, right now, Norma isn't really seeing this guy that she saw the previous week, and so it's more, there's a lot of things that are in limbo, but there's also a lot of things that are kind of in motion too, so we'll see what all transpires, but thank you for being a beautiful and splendid audience. I love you all to death. And remember, I'll be back before you know it. Take care.